So I'll call to order this workshop for the budget, April 12th. And just a couple housekeeping items. Just to go through tonight, we'll be looking at the school department budget and a brief discussion about the federal relief funds and what we're expecting from that. On Monday, April 19th, is a regular city council meeting. Just as a way of public notice, I will not be present at that meeting, and the council will select someone to sit in the chair role that evening. Monday, April 26th, then, will be our next budget meeting. All these meetings begin at 6 p.m. And on the 26th will be the introduction, review of revenues, administrative department budgets, maintenance budget, general assistance budget, and social service agencies. On Monday, May 3rd, will be the public safety budgets. And Monday, May 10th, will be the library, recreation, public works, wastewater, water department, and capital budgets. We will look at potentially scheduling other budget meetings as we go forward and as we take up items, depending on time and what issues surface. Just for the council, as we go through the workshops and for the community, workshops are intended to, informational. We don't take any votes during these meetings. All votes on the budget items will take place during a regular council meeting, and that will happen later on, most likely in June. It's really through these workshops. The public is certainly welcome to send in comments and ask questions, and that will take place, and we'll try to monitor those throughout the evening. And so make sure that any questions we have, we certainly want to raise it during this time. We'll have more opportunity. If there's additional information that we need, we can request that and revisit these items as we go forward. One thing also want to just make the public aware of, will be consistent with the changes that the governor has made in terms of with restrictions and gatherings and all of that, and the loosening of restrictions, effective with our April 26th budget meeting. So it will be following the next council meeting on the 19th. Will operate under the existing process, but starting on the 26th, we will resume the process for public participation as it was prior to the restrictions. And so what you'll see in the notice is that meetings will be held in the City Hall council chambers with only the allowable number of participants based on maintaining social distancing guidelines. There will be additional seating available in the second floor auditorium for citizens. Those wishing to make comments on an agenda item will have the opportunity to make those live at that location through the use of technology. Email questions and public comments will no longer be read aloud throughout the meeting. Individuals are welcome to email counselors to share their feedback on any issue. So if the community wants to comment on agenda items, that will take place in the council chambers and or up in the auditorium following all the appropriate distancing guidelines. But we'll be resuming that with the April 26th workshop and moving forward. That is always subject to change should the restrictions change with the state. And with that, councilors, any other questions or comments before we get started? All the councilors are present, so I will turn this over to Superintendent Higgins for the school budget presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Manager Mosier, Chair Hamilton, council members and citizens of Ellsworth, on behalf of the Ellsworth School Board, I'm pleased to present a status update on the proposed FY22 Ellsworth School Department budget here at this evening's workshop. Joining me here in the presentation this evening, and I'll give him one more chance, Paul, is Finance Committee member Paul Markosian. The guiding principles used in the preparation of the FY22 Ellsworth School Department budget are to adequately and appropriately fund public education in a fiscally responsible fashion, maintain consistency with the Ellsworth School Department vision and mission, support ongoing efforts to continually improve all aspects of school department operations, and ultimately be regarded as the best school system in the state of Maine, and as a system that provides outstanding and comprehensive academic and co- and extracurricular experiences for all of our students, and plays an integral role in the continued growth and development of the city of Ellsworth. Included under that major goal are the following objectives: ensure that the proposed expenditures result in high-quality programs for our students, make our system regarded as not only an attractive but the best option for families with school choice or who are considering relocating to the area, contribute to the economic and workforce development in our area, and be supported most of all by our school board, our council, and our community members. Since initiating the budget preparation process in mid-November, we've worked diligently to craft a budget that's consistent with our guiding principles and addresses specific needs in the areas of increased staffing to meet identified enrollment shifts, trends, and program needs, to address increased needs for students and staff, and amongst those are the social, the mental, and the emotional components for returning students to school, not just this year, but also next fall. Ongoing facilities and maintenance needs, and the proposed addition of a new cybersecurity program at Hancock County Technical Center. As it did last spring during the budget process, the ongoing presence of the COVID-19 pandemic continues to impact planning and budgeting. While we have received coronavirus relief funds, and I'll use the acronym CRF for that, and elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds, I'll use ESSER for that, and have used them to ensure that we could keep our schools safe and open, we're also reviewing the parameters and guidelines for expenditures of the most recent allocation to best leverage the funds in support of keeping our schools safe, healthy, and open for in-person instruction. In addition to purchasing through a needs assessment for each set of funding that we have received or are about to receive, we're also continuing to actively seek to identify items in the request I'm presenting here tonight that meet the parameters for funding under the latest two ESSER sets of funding that will be eligible costs for the requirements of using those funds. And I know there's going to be some conversation on it later, but some of those pieces are, they must be directly COVID-related. They are to supplement and not supplant, and they cannot replace lost revenues. So we can talk a little bit more about that. The reason I mention those is those funds have been instrumental in us being able to keep our schools open for the entire school year, albeit in a hybrid model. We've been open all year with the exception of times in which we've had a positive case and close contact tracing has required that we go remote for a short period of time. Aside from that, we've been open. And the intent is to move forward next year, and this budget is based upon the idea of having all of our students and staff in-person instruction 5 days a week. The budget being presented here this evening, or the draft this evening, will adequately and appropriately fund our educational program and is also fiscally responsible. And as you'll notice, it's a little different for those of you who were here at the April 2nd Finance Committee meeting. We have made some adjustments. But as the fiscal outlook for the next couple of budget cycles is still projected to be challenging, we're working towards a final budget that meets the school department's needs and results in minimal impact on the city's taxpayers. While this budget reflects a number of identified needs in terms of staffing and facilities infrastructure that are not included, we're confident the budget as presented will meet our prioritized needs for the 21-22 school year, reflect our vision and mission, conform to the guiding principles I just mentioned, and meet with the support of the council and Ellsworth citizens. Following is a general overview of the proposed expenditure and proposed revenue sides of the budget. So what I would like to talk about first is the revenue side. In past years when I've presented at this time of the year, the legislature has not passed a budget. We all know that they have passed a budget this year. So the funding figures that we have are correct. So as you folks know, as the school board knows, and I want the community to know, we reiterate that funds to support the school department budget come from a number of different sources. One is state support in the form of subsidy allocations and debt service reimbursement. Tuition revenues from communities who pay their resident students who choose to attend Ellsworth schools. And local citizen support through property tax revenues. Maine Department of Education distributed its final version of the annual ED 279 funding documents for FY22 on April 5th. The funding model approved by the legislature is based upon a combination of district enrollment, fiscal capacity, which is evaluation, and past expenditures in certain areas of the funding formula. In the approved state budget, the mill rate applied to the city valuation over a 3-year average to determine the required local contribution reduced from 8.128 mils to 7.9 mils. Okay? And again, for everyone that's watching or listening, that required local contribution is the amount we must raise as a city in order to receive the full level of state subsidy. With that reduction from 8.128 to 7.9 mils is a resulting decrease in the amount we're required to raise in order to receive that full subsidy by just over $82,000 to $8,599,676.77. Additionally, for subsidy for pre-K through 12 grades, we'll see an increase of $161,679.01. The state also provides fiscal support for career and technical education. As a result of increased state support of education and support for one new program, we're projected to receive $1,705,063.50 in our CTE subsidy allocation, which is an increase of just under $50,000 from the subsidy level for FY21. And included in that is $69,000 to support the new cybersecurity program. Okay. With regard to tuition revenues, we're projecting an increase of just under $112,000 in tuition for regular education and special education students as compared to this year. Now, additionally, we've updated our available undesignated fund balances and reserve lines. It's a process that we use every year. We take our budget reports, our budget actuals, and we add an additional step to it. Typically, we do it in March and April. We will go through and develop a report that provides projected anticipated ending balances for the school year. And that's what the figures I'm about to share is based upon. As a result of operating in a hybrid instructional model since September, and with the availability of CRF funds and ESSER funds to keep schools safe and open, which resulted in expending less than the projected amount of budgeted funds in many areas, supplies, equipment, transportation, etc. The fact that we had multiple unfilled staff positions this year, between 7 and 8 to 9 ed techs throughout the balance of the year, that we've had at least 3 teaching positions unfilled, and we've had reductions in transportation fuel costs, we're projecting to, like last year, have a very healthy balance of funds from the current year budget to offset expenditures for the FY22 budget, and to place funds into and create a number of reserve accounts. We'll talk about creating a special education reserve account, and we'll talk about why when we get to that cost center. Talk about increasing the amount of money in the minor capital reserve account and the reasons why, and to replenish the HCTC minor capital reserve account. So the numbers I want you to be familiar with are these. And again, this is unaudited. We do not have the audit from FY20 yet. This is based upon that report that we did, projected ending balances. So with that projected report, we're looking at an unaudited balance of $3.117 million for 6/30 of 20. Okay. For the FY20 budget, we applied $1.32 million to offset expenses, okay, leaving an available $1.797 million. From a projected balance sheet that we ran over the weekend and finished up today, we're projecting to have $2.02 million left at the end of FY21, making a total undesignated amount of $3.8 million. As you can see on the spreadsheet that I provided to you, what we're looking at right now at this point in the budget process is applying $1.8 million of that to offset expenditures for FY22. That's an increase of $480,000 over the current year. Okay? Again, those are unexpected funds, unexpended funds that we can use to reduce the level of impact on our taxpayers.
So just to,
Yeah.
that's the balance forward. 1.8 is going to be the balance forward.
That would be,
you're
at this point in time, yes, that's the amount that we would apply against expenditures, yes. So that would leave available just over $2 million out of that amount. What we're looking at doing is recommending the creation of a special education reserve account in the amount of $150,000. To take $200,000 of that and put it into the minor capital reserve for the school department, and to take $100,000 of that amount and put it into the HCTC minor capital reserve. And that's a total of $450,000, which would still leave $1.57 million in undesignated fund balance. And the reason we're projecting it at that level and recommending it at that level is, if you look at the history of fund balance usage since we withdrew from RSU 24, the first budget that was done applied a $1.2 million fund balance against expenditures. That's unsustainable. And over the next several years, we tried to reduce that. In fact, we got it as low as $800,000 before things started to change and we needed to use additional fund balance. But by using those amounts of money at a high level and trying to be as consistent as possible, if you use too much fund balance in one year, you run the risk of having a fiscal cliff the following year. You either don't have enough revenues or you need to make significant cuts in your budget. And that's one of the challenges. So that's general fund. Okay? When we talk about career and technical education, okay, as of 6/30/2020, unaudited fund balance is $235,000. And again, remember, a change in law 2 years ago required that even though we own and operate Hancock County Technical Center, we need to operate it as a separate fiscal account. So it's $235,000 there. We applied $70,803 against those expenditures in this current year's budget, leaving a balance of $163,962. If you recall, we lost one of the boilers at HCTC during the school year, and we came to you folks asking to take some money out of that reserve. We took $63,962.74 out of that balance to pay for a portion of the cost of the boiler, leaving an estimated balance of $100,000. The estimated surplus based upon our projected balances worksheet is $71,000, which would leave $171,249 as a fund balance for CTE. Now, you notice on the revenue spreadsheet that I provided, or the summary sheet, we have not made any determination of whether we use any of those funds to offset expenditures for HCTC. That is still on the table. That's something that we do. We meet with Hancock County superintendents and the HCTC advisory group, superintendents weekly, the advisory group monthly. That should be a conversation we have there also. So with that being said, with our current reserve accounts, we have a minor capital reserve which was established in 2019 of $100,000. When we replaced the HCTC boiler, we took $3,625 out of that, leaving $96,375 as a balance. So with the recommendations we have to replenish or create reserve accounts, adding $200,000 to the $96,374 in minor capital projects would leave a reserve account of $296,374. We'd have a special education reserve of $150,000. And it would reestablish the minor capital reserve at HCTC at $100,000. And again, this is prudent planning because we do have expenditures that are coming. You know, if you've listened to budget presentations this year and you've listened to them in past years, the roof at Ellsworth High School needs to be replaced. We've got a 4 to 5 year model of doing that. We also have a boiler at HCTC, the second boiler. I don't know if you folks remember, but when we lost the first one, it was within a week that the second one went down for a day. It would be beneficial to have funding there to support that if we needed to do that over the next year. Another piece that's a little bit of an unknown right now, we're looking at the potential of the need to transfer funds from this balance to support the food service program. You know, our food service program has always operated very well, and there has been a contribution the city has made to support that. One of the challenges we found this year, and it's still too early to tell, is to think about the revenues that you have to support your food service program. They're based upon your reduced lunch, your free lunch, and your paid lunch. This year, we've been receiving funding for all students on a reimbursement model from the state. The challenge is, when we did our budget last year, we were planning on numbers that we currently have when students are in school 5 days a week, every day, everybody. We've been in a hybrid model all year, so we've got half or less than half of the students that we have in school every day, so your lunch revenues are down. So we had a really good month last month with revenues, with students coming back, and we started today with 4th grade and 8th grade students coming back, and we'll be having students coming back after April vacation. We're looking to see where that revenue picture takes us, but there may be a need to transfer some funds to support that to make it whole. The other piece that we're analyzing is, with the smaller number of students who are eating on a daily basis, we're also expending less in our food and supply costs. So we're monitoring that very closely. So that's a number that's still a little bit fluid. May I go get a tissue? My eye is watering. Thanks. Yeah, we're monitoring that very closely. And as we work forward over the next couple of weeks, and I'm anticipating that the school department and the school board is going to take this budget up formally, either in a special meeting the last week of April or a special meeting the first week of May, we'll have a better idea of where that's going to come out with food service. So, to close up on this part of the discussion, utilizing our fund balances in this manner is consistent with how we've managed funds since the withdrawal of the school system from the RSU back in 2014. We look at the balance as a means of not only offsetting proposed expenditures, but also to be available for unanticipated contingencies, and as a means of creating, when appropriate and necessary, reserve accounts. It's also important to know that we manage these funds not for a single year, but over the longer term. And to be cognizant of the fact that if we were to use all of the available fund balance in 1 year, you could take the remaining amount of that and apply it to this budget and end up in a reduced local assessment on your community. When you start the budget process next year, you're that much further behind. We also need to remember that 1.32 million last year, projected 1.8 million this year. That's not sustainable. Okay, we're only able to do those amounts because we've had 2 years because of COVID that we have not expended our fully proposed budget. Questions on any of that before we go to expenditures?
Just in terms of the overall change, what is that in terms of for revenue? What is the total revenue that, because I didn't add all this up. We don't have the fund balance on here. So what are you projecting for your total revenue?
Total revenue that we're going to use from the fund balance is 1.8 million.
No,
And
no.
what would be left as unanticipated after creating the reserve accounts would be 1,546,000.
Is that to calm us?
I thought you might like a little serenade.
I get ultimate, because you haven't got to the expense side. I'm just curious what, in terms of taking everything that you budgeted for revenue, just what that total amount looks like.
For this year, Dale?
Yeah, for the budget. Because up top, you have the total expenses, which I know you're going to get to in a minute. I was just curious what I didn't want to go through it, adding it up.
The total amount of revenues for this budget that I'm presenting?
Yes.
Total amount of revenues actually on this spreadsheet. You go down to the middle of the 3 columns on the lower half of the page, take revenues, Down at the bottom, you're looking at a total amount of revenues from all the sources we discussed of $23,547,016.96.
Thank you.
So on the proposed expenditure side, and for those of you who were here a couple of Friday mornings ago, you notice this is a little bit different. Just run down through the cost centers. So the way school budget is structured, we look at multiple cost centers. First one we'll talk about is our regular instruction program, and these are funds to support pre-K through grade 12 regular instructional programming. What we're looking at under regular instruction is a budget of just over $7 million and an increase of $394,111.84, or 5.91%. And let me go back and make a disclaimer. One of the pieces that runs through all of these cost centers where you have staffing is the fact that there are wage increases that are based upon negotiated agreement increases for wages and benefits. Okay. So I'll try not to repeat that in each cost center, but that's a good portion of that. You know, your budget is between 70 and 80% your personnel costs. The one real positive thing out of that is the way health insurance is done in school departments for districts that use the MEA Benefits Trust. We were very fortunate. Our health insurance premium increase this year is 0%. I wish I could say it was due to me, but I can say that, but you probably won't buy it. That's okay. But in regular instruction, increase of $394,000. About $175,000 of that comes in the increase in new staffing positions. A big part of the remaining balance comes in the move of lease and purchase costs for one-to-one devices from the IT budget line into regular instruction, something we had to do through the Department of Ed. But with the staffing positions, what we're proposing is to take a current world language teacher, Spanish, from a .5 position and make it a full-time position to account for increased interest in foreign language with students. Is to create a full-time position in the music field shared between two schools, a vocal instructor at EHS to be shared with a half-time music teacher at EEMS to support both of those programs and enrollment, particularly at the middle school. To add a grade 7 classroom teacher due to fluctuations in enrollment. One thing I would mention to you, we're tracking our enrollment very closely, and we always do this time of year. Depending upon what we have for students at the lower grade levels, and we've had a lot of students who have moved into a homeschooling realm this year, and we also had a number of students who had a small kindergarten class this year, and a lot of that was due to the fact of people not being comfortable sending their children to school. We don't know how many of those children are going to come next year. Right now, the budget reflects an increase in a grade 7 teaching position. Depending upon what our enrollment numbers look like, what kindergarten screening looks like, it may be possible not to have that in there and to make a transfer within our existing teaching staff. But right now, this budget reflects that additional position. The other piece is the proposed expansion of the pre-K program to full day and 5 days a week. Programs that were mentioned, positions that were mentioned the other morning were a math interventionist to service students K through 8 and 9 through 12, one each. We've moved those out of the local budget into the ESSER budget. Okay? We've determined that those would be an allowable cost to help with learning recovery. So there are 2 positions that were taken out of the local budget and are going to be put into that budget. So that's your regular instructional program. Special education, this accounts for your special education program pre-K through 12. All students were identified under IDEA. We're looking at an increase of $283,000. Now, over $400,000 of that is in new positions. Okay? And someone's going to call me on the math there and say, Dan, wait a minute. You said $282,000 of an increase. How can you have over $400,000 in new positions? It's because we've seen some reductions in other areas of the special education budget. But staffing is what's driving this budget this year. we're looking at the need for, in the local budget, 9 new Ed Tech 3s at EEMS to account for incoming student needs. Many of those positions are one-to-one positions, okay, required to satisfy the needs of an IEP. We're actually looking at 11 positions, but 2 of them have been moved into a local entitlement federal grant that supports special needs students. Also, the proposed addition of a special education teacher at grades K through 4 to deal with increased caseloads. We have students coming in who require increased services. That also translates to needing an additional teacher at that grade level. That's the bulk of your increase. A couple of other things that I'd like to mention with regard to special ed, just so that people are understanding of them. Safety care training is something that we have funds in the budget we did last year that can take place over the summer. It's really best to have dedicated time for our staff members who need to be eligible for that to do that over the summer, rather than on the PLC days or other in-service days. When they do it on those days, they miss out on other professional development. It's really best to have dedicated time. We weren't able to do it last summer because of COVID, but those funds still exist in the budget. Further development of planning to support staff in social and emotional learning. Again, this is another one of those areas, and this will be a common theme tonight when you get to the federal funds. We're still looking at where are there things in this budget that can qualify under the use of the ESSER funds that may be able to come out of here. So that's something that we're still working on. That's one area that could happen. Projected out-of-district tuition. This is one of the places that right now we're looking at a reduction in costs. Okay. When I say out-of-district tuition, what we're talking about are students for whom all of the programming that you provide in your local district, in the least restrictive environment. You start by bringing a student into special ed who's eligible, and you program for them. There are some students that, despite what you have in place, you cannot program for locally, and those students often require a placement in an out-of-district facility, whether it be Kids Peace, Stillwater Academy, or some other entity. Right now, we're seeing fewer students than we projected last year. This is one of the reasons that I mentioned a special education reserve. I've worked in schools where you start the year and you know how many students you have who are going to be in one of those placements. One of them moves away, the family moves to another community, that cost goes with them. But if somebody moves in and you're talking $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year cost, that's a big chunk of your budget. So, right now, that's a reduction. The other place that we're looking at using ESSER funds is in summer school expenses, okay, both in regular ed and in special ed. One of the things that comes with the most recent version of ESSER funds is to focus as much as possible on learning recovery. Students who are challenged throughout the course of the school year, and we want to use those funds for that. One place in special education that you need to be cautious is you're required to maintain a certain level of fiscal effort in special education. If you reduce spending by a certain amount, you may not meet that. Okay, you're required to meet it. But that's special ed in a nutshell. It's driven by needs. Career and technical education. We're looking at an increase of $154,144. In essence, what we're looking at for increases here are the new cybersecurity program expenses, which are $136,750. Okay. You're looking at a new instructor, salary and benefits. You're looking at between $35,000 and $40,000 of renovation costs to prepare a classroom to support that, because we don't have a classroom to support that right now. And another $35,000, $40,000 cost for equipment and supplies to start that program up. So one of the things that we're still working on, cybersecurity is a really hot field right now. Director Bowles has been working with one of the colleges here in the state who may be able to provide us a virtual instructor, whereby for 1 year, the instructor works virtually from the college, and we need to provide an IT staff member to be in the classroom with the students to support it on that end. This reflects a new instructor right now. That could change between now and the next time you folks see this budget. I'd say that's a good possibility. The other piece that I would mention, again, I said this, with the state funding, $69,640 comes along in state funding to support a new program. Okay. If the decision is made to eliminate that program and the expenses, that revenue goes away also. Other instruction, and this is after school, summer school, co and extracurricular activities. You know, as you all know, the co and extracurricular programs that we have in our schools are outstanding and amazing. A great deal of support. They provide a great deal of community pride, morale in the schools. We're looking at an increase of $65,942, or 9.44%. And it comes in the following. It comes in athletic supplies, cheering mats, uniforms, and supplies at EMS, co-curricular dues for various student competitions at Ellsworth High School, purchase services, dues, and uniforms at EHS, and equipment for Ellsworth High School athletics. And I'll say it again because I said it at the meeting last Friday or the Friday before, soccer goals and pole vault mats. Those come to the tune of $25,000. Mr. Blanchett, I said that for you, Councilor Blanchett, because I can see you smiling. I'm smiling under here too. They're necessary, they're important, and they're not inexpensive. But that accounts for your increase in other instruction. Student staff support, which is your guidance program, your school nursing program, your social work program, instructional staff training, library, instructional technology, and curriculum and assessment. We're looking at an increase of $27,454 here. That's a pretty small increase when you're looking at all of those various components of this cost center. One of the biggest things is, I mentioned, the one-to-one devices for students and staff have moved out of this category and into instruction. So that's why you're not seeing it, that figure higher. But what's included in here is proposed staffing of about $65,000 for a Section 504 coordinator. Now, Section 504, most people are familiar with special ed. Section 504 is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. It's an act that was put into place many, many years ago. It was expanded back when Senator Kennedy, anybody remember that name? Senator Ted Kennedy? And one of the final acts that he did in his last year in Congress was to expand the eligibility for Section 504. What that is a section in law where students who have certain physical disabilities, either long-term, short-term, temporary, and other learning disabilities who may not be eligible under special education to be eligible to receive services and accommodations under Section 504. Okay. We have over 100 students who are identified under that in the Ellsworth School Department. Just like with special education, which comes with an individual education plan, Section 504 eligible students come with a 504 plan. It's basically a sister law to special education. With special education, you do get funding. You get some support federally, you get some support through the state. 504 is not, it's a local expense. So what we've seen is the need to have support for case management for the students who are on those caseloads. We do have a 504 coordinator that services students grades 7 through 12 and case manages for them. Case management for students grades K through 7 is managed by our special education teachers, special education administrators. Okay? We need someone else to serve in that stead. It's an overdue burden on those people. Now, I will also tell you that is one of those positions that when you look at social and emotional needs that may come from students who become eligible under Section 504, that may be able to be funded under ESSER. Okay? If that's the case, that's a position and set of benefits that would come out of this budget and move into ESSER. Okay? I didn't take it out yet because we're not 100% certain of that.
Quick question. I just
Sure.
want to make sure. So the document I have is dated April 2nd.
Yep.
Is that the correct? Is there?
This is what I'm giving you is updated from that.
All right. Well, we don't have that.
Oh, okay.
So there was an update. That's why I asked you about the totals. It must, we had the
How
April 2nd.
about we do this?
And some of the numbers were off, so I was wondering if I was looking at the right.
No, I'm better prepared than that. My numbers are good.
You keep going, you're gonna have everyone of us so confused, this won't be any problem, Dan.
Well, I want you to look at the bottom line, bottom right-hand corner of that spreadsheet.
Are you projecting it? Is that?
No,
Oh, okay.
I can send it to you.
Oh, okay.
They're already logged in. How do you send it?
Thank you, Don.
Okay.
We need
Now I
the
know
mu-
why you're asking that question, Dan.
We need the music back.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not that good.
That, yeah, I didn't realize that at that time that it was a different spreadsheet.
No, the spreadsheet and the detail sheets are current. Can you hold up your
Well, this is
spreadsheet?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, no, I see. I thought what you guys were looking for was my notes. I see. You don't have the actual spreadsheet?
Yeah, it was, I'm right, I'm trying to do math.
So this is NG then?
That's the current one.
Okay.
And you know what? Pete,
Hey, that looks a lot better than
you
the first
were,
one you sent.
you were gone when I sent that.
Okay,
Does that help a little bit?
much better.
Okay.
So,
That was supposed to come along with the music.
so by tomorrow, the next day, is that just gonna keep dropping if we wait long enough?
You have enough.
Depends on what song plays behind me.
All right, sorry to interrupt, Dan.
No, I'm glad you did. Glad you did. So we left off with student, staff, support, and services, okay. So I think I left off with the 504 coordinator is a position that could possibly be moved into the ESSER funds, and if so, it would come out of that cost center of student and staff support, okay, which would reduce the budget, Counselor Phillips, as you just requested.
See? It's falling, it's working out really good,
The other
keep
piece,
talking.
the other piece that's included in this cost center are efforts and initiatives and materials to support social and emotional learning. Again, those are other areas where, you know, medical, nursing, social and emotional mental health are things that directly can connect to COVID. So those things may come out as well. Those are things that we're working on as we learn more about the parameters of the most recent set of funds. We still haven't got the final piece on that. We did talk about a part-time nurse to help administer medication. That has come out of here. That's going to go through ESSER. That's a direct cost. So that's already happened, and that's why you see that smaller increase on that particular category. We okay to move forward?
Yes.
System administration, which is the school board, superintendent's office, and business office, we've got a 1.93% increase, $11,000. Wages and insurance, legal and audit services, software maintenance. Building administration or school administration, which is funding to support all of your administrative offices at Ellsworth Elementary Middle School and Ellsworth High School. Does not include HCTC or adult education. This is just those two offices, but your principals, assistant principals, administrative assistants, and all costs necessary to run those offices has an increase of 5.08%, $46,000. Facilities and maintenance. Those of you who were here a couple of Fridays ago, you'll see this is much different from what was on the initial spreadsheet. We've made a number of changes. What is still in this budget right now You'll see an increase of just over $90,000 or 3.7%. First part of the multi-year project of the Ellsworth High School roof, $75,000. A replacement of half of the bleachers at Ellsworth High School gymnasium. When Chuck got bids on that, he was able to get bids to do it in 2 different phases. What this phase would cover is 1/2 of the gym plus the electrical work that needs to be done.
Will that be the home side?
Yes, of course. And we will put dedicated seating in for school board members and city councilors, if it helps. But do the second phase in the following year. Tennis court resurfacing for $21,500, and that's an expense that really needs to stay in the budget. Walkway bollards at the high school, those do need to be redone. So those pieces are still in there. Some of the other projects, we had windows for 2 different areas of the high school. Chuck and I talked earlier today. Those are things that can be put off for another year, but those are also things we're exploring that could be related to COVID. When you're looking at ventilation, those windows do not work, they're older. There may be an avenue to fund those under that type of a cost. So we've taken those out of there. Transportation, again, a reduction in overall expenses. You see a decrease of 6% there. Food service, already talked about it. Right now, we're looking at an increase of $51,600 in support from the city. We're looking at a projected 3% increase in food expenses. Again, we're planning on having all of our students and staff in school 5 days a week, starting in the fall. So right now, that's what we've got for revenue figures in there. A couple of things that we don't know. One is, we've heard that the level of reimbursement that we're receiving in FY21, which is a higher level, and no students are paying for lunch right now. We're all getting reimbursed. At that higher level, the revenue figure may be a little bit higher. But also, if we have all of our kids in school, that'll be an accurate figure. So we're still working on that piece. We'll know better in another 3 to 4 weeks. Hopefully, we'll see that increase go down. Adult education, again, the increase of just over $70,000 in the city's contribution. Again, this is a growing program. What's in that budget right now? Addition of a classroom space. It still requires a little bit of work to finish. Annie's been very creative and efficient in the work that's been done. And if you haven't driven by the Mill Mall to see the new sign out front, down on the north end of the mall, it looks great. The adult education has got a front-facing location. It's going to be great for the visibility. And once we have students back in person, we see that program growing. Furnitures and fixtures for the new space, wages and insurance, and tuition reimbursement. So with all of that presentation, let's talk about what the budget looks like. So the FY22 school department budget proposal reflects, including adult education right now, an overall increase of $866,328.13, or 3.78% over approved expenditures for this current year. To support a budget at that level, citizens, all of us in here, would be asked to contribute $11,669,474.41 to fund the public education system in Ellsworth, which would be an increase of $131,233.57, or 1.14% over current year. Since returning as a municipal school system in 2014, the Ellsworth School Department and the Ellsworth School Board have consistently brought forth budgets that reflect the mission and vision, appropriately and adequately fund programming that makes our school system a highly attractive option to those considering moving to our region and taking advantage of the opportunities here. As you know, and like you all do, we take our roles very seriously. We take our roles as educators seriously and as active participants in the growth and development of our city. We'll also take seriously the importance of bringing forth budgets that provide value and are fiscally responsible. We've always done this pre-pandemic, and we're following the same protocols since the pandemic has set itself upon us, and this year is no exception. I'd like to conclude my presentation just to illustrate that point. I'm trying to think. Councilor Phillips, I think you were on the council in FY16. Councilor Blanchett, were you? Okay. So Since that year, when we had a 2.2% increase in expenditures, that was a year when state funding was down quite a bit. The council and the voters voted to increase a pretty significant increase in local appropriation, $925,000. It was a 9% increase over the previous year. Since that year, I just want to go down through what the final budgets that have been approved have come in at. FY17, it was a 2.6% increase in expenditures and a $0 increase in local appropriation. FY18, it was a 1.76% increase in expenditures and a 0.48% increase in local appropriation. That was just over $53,000. FY19, it was a 3.43% increase in expenditures and a 1.93% increase to the local appropriation. It was $214,000. FY20, it was a 5.65% increase in expenditures and a 2.9% increase to the local appropriation, $328,000. And for FY21, I think we all came into the budget process last year committed to finding no impact on our taxpayers or no additional impact. We did get a 1.91% increase in expenditures, but we reduced the local appropriation by $3,300. So I just present that information to show that, something you all know. We bring our budgets forth, they're thoughtful, they're well-developed, they're designed to be fiscally efficient and fiscally responsible. And again, historically, we propose budgets that reflect expenditures based upon prioritized needs. Again, they're consistent with the mission and vision, support our goals and objectives, and adequately and appropriately fund education pre-K through adult ed. On behalf of the school department staff and the school board, I thank you for the opportunity to present this draft here at this workshop this evening. And we appreciate the ongoing support of the council, this council and all councils preceding this one, and the citizens for supporting education in Ellsworth. And if I could snap my fingers and have some music come on, I'd do it.
So, questions, Counselor?
Just the number of students we're talking about, the total enrollment by school?
Total enrollment by school, we are about between 875 and 915 at EEMS, that's pre-K through 8, and we're projecting 505 at Ellsworth High School. Hancock County Technical Center, right now, and I'm glad you asked that question, Councilor Kaplan. I'll go back to talk about tuition revenues. Over the past several years, we've been at between 190 and 230 students at HCTC. Now that's typically between 75 and 90 students from Ellsworth High School who are included in the 500 count at Ellsworth High School, but it's also the balance of those students that come from other high schools.
So you said 190 to 200?
230, yep, depending upon the year and depending upon the interest in the various programs. And while you're pondering your next question, that's another piece. The tuition figures in here, I mentioned we are looking to see an increase in special ed and regular education funding. We still don't have the final numbers on enrollment at HCTC. The pandemic has kind of set some of the recruiting efforts backwards. Director Bowles has still got another school or two to finalize with. That may impact some of these numbers as well. Excuse me.
Chairman, may I ask a question?
Of course.
Dan, I'm a little concerned about the number of positions and additions that you're planning to fund through the ESSER funds, and what that looks like long-term, because those funds are not going to be available forever.
Yep.
So when you're adding positions and a year or 2 years from now there's no more ESSER funds, your budget's going to look
We'll have to make some,
Insane, because we're gonna have to make some-
we'll have to make decisions. But when you look at the last two sets of ESSER funds, one of them goes out to 2023, the other one goes out to 2022. So you're talking a year or two to support those positions. Again, these are positions that we need. You talk about support for math, absolutely. That's not just an Ellsworth problem, that's a statewide problem, that's a nationwide problem. When you're looking at the social and emotional and mental health of kids, it's a critical need. We have had some success in the past by seeding some programs. For example, our instructional coach that services our district. We tried for several years to get that position into the local budget. We always presented it as part of the local budget. What we ended up doing was 1 year funding it fully out of Title I, because it was an allowable cost. The next year splitting it half Title I, half local, demonstrating that it worked, and then having it fully in the local budget, which it is now. One of the pieces, when you're looking at interventionists, you don't like to say it this way, but when you're looking at someone that's coming in to help address needs and address problems and address issues, in essence, those people are trying to work themselves out of a job. You address the issues, you correct it, you move on. Not necessarily sure that's going to be the case, but we're looking at 2 years of being able to support those positions.
I guess for my own peace of mind, what I'd like to see is the fiscal impact of those positions.
Mhm.
So instead of, and, you know, you've provided us with documentation showing the reduction with those positions being relocated into ESSER funds. But it would be, for my own benefit as well, it would be interesting to see what that fiscal impact is, because again, you know, if we go forward with this budget and those positions are created, which I'm not arguing whether they're needed or not, I'm just, then in 2 years, that fiscal budget's gonna include all of those positions. It's not gonna necessarily show an increase, but in all actuality, there's gonna be a significant increase in the amount of funds that the citizens need to contribute, because that state funding or federal funding is not gonna be there anymore to support all those positions.
And that's a decision that we're going to have to make. I can tell you right now, what we budget, when you're budgeting for a position that's not filled, it's a brand-new position. Where we budget with regard to health insurance benefits and step on the teaching scale and the degree, if we're looking at 2 math interventionists and potentially a K through 7 504 coordinator, you're talking about $65,000 a person at what we budget. Now, when you hire someone, you may get someone who is Master Step 3 instead of Master Step 10, and they may only take single subscriber insurance. That would be a lower cost. You also may find that it's someone that's at the top of the scale who's the best candidate, and you have to go with them. That's why we kind of budget middle of the road. So right now, the impact of those 3 positions, again, one of them's still in here, $65,000 apiece, you're talking $195,000. But you're absolutely right. I mean, you're absolutely, it's a great question, Glenn.
I have one question from community, Gwen Clark. I think you answered this, but how much money did the schools get for COVID assistance, and what was it spent on? And has there been a constant influx of COVID money since the first round?
I've got that information. I didn't answer it in terms of dollars, but what I can tell you is we've received several allocations, and I don't think I can give Mrs. Clark every item because there are thousands of items that have been purchased, but what's been received so far, starting last spring, we received what was known as funds out of the CARES Act, $214,000. Coronavirus relief funds was the first big fund we got towards the end of the summer. That was $1.257 million. We received a grant for day programming for childcare. This is what supports the program that we're operating in conjunction with the Moore Center. Students who were in their remote day, that was $301,000. And that wasn't just the Moore Center, that was also Trip Family Daycare locally. That was another local daycare that took us up on the opportunity. Adult education for $6,500. CRF 2, okay, cool. That was one that we received middle to the end of October, was $1.317 million. There was also a CRF reallocation. On one of the applications that we filled out, there was a section that said, if you think you might need more money, check this box and put an amount in. We checked the box and put in $200,000 and we got it.
How much?
$200,000. Okay. And
On
I'll come
top
back,
of the
so I'll come back to some of the things that we
1.317.
purchased. I'll come back, what's that?
On top of the 1.317.
Yeah, and I'm not done yet, there's more.
No, but I'm saying
Yes.
that was that round.
Yes, yep, correct. Then there's
Okay.
also what's known as ESSER. We're calling it ESSER 2. This is one that we received and we got the parameters on a month or so ago, $888,000.
800.
Yep. And ESSER 3, it's kind of sounding like a Rocky series of movies. We were joking at an administrative team meeting, we might have ESSER 17 at some point in time, but ESSER 3 was, the allocation is $1.994 million. Okay, talking a total of $6.1 million.
The total of these funds is 6.1
Yes.
million?
Yep.
6.1 million
Now-
additional funding.
Now, almost 2.8 million have not been expended or spoken for yet. That's what we're working on right now, you know, the funds that Glenn is asking about to support those positions.
30?
But if you're talking about what, but I think it's important to know what you're talking about the funds were expended upon. Okay. I think it might be helpful for people to know this. The CRF funds, okay, coronavirus relief funds. And I also want to mention to you, the CRF 1 and the CRF 2 that we received, when we first received those, early fall and mid-fall, there was a deadline to expend them by December 30th of 2020.
So here's the money, make sure you spend it on something.
And we did. It wasn't until the last couple of weeks of December that they said, no, you can expend further than that. But CRF funds, which were distributed on a per-pupil model across the state, they had to be expenses that were not previously budgeted or previously planned. They must be addressing urgent needs caused by COVID-19, not be reimbursed through any other funding source. And this is where it said, can cover costs between, through December 30th. They must be used and received by December 30th. And they cannot cover lost revenues. Okay, so, you know, the food service thing we talked about earlier, that would not have been an allowable cost. But when you look at those sets of funds, we use them for a number of things. You look at the tents that we have up on school property. Okay, we purchase those. You look at the 87 Polycom units in the classroom, similar to this, that allow us to do synchronous learning, 87 of those. You look at the number of devices that we got so that every single student could have a device and we could make sure that students had hotspots. You look at any of the equipment that we needed, signage, equipment, water bottle filling stations, anything that we could do to support keeping students and staff safe and spaced. Equipment and supplies for classrooms. So in many cases, you have classrooms where kids might share books. We spent a lot of money on making sure that every single kid had their own supplies, their own equipment. And when you're looking at science equipment for experiments. Okay. All of that, and that was part of the guidelines that we had to use. We also, because you look at our teachers, because they were teaching in person, they were teaching remotely, and teaching synchronously, we paid them, starting 4 hours a week extra planning time. As we got closer to the end of that calendar year when we had to spend the money, 4 hours a week, they were spending more time than that. They were paid more than that. Okay.
You know, no matter what our own philosophies are and thought processes are on those funds, when you hear that in total, it's mind-boggling.
It is.
But you as superintendent would be doing the local people an injustice if you didn't chase it and use it. Even though we may not personally agree with the whole process of how it was sent to you. But, you know, I'm happy that you got it. I'm dumbfounded that they're sending that much money out to just this one school. If you look at it nationally, it's got to,
And there's more that we did. You know, we also hired, I don't want to call them long-term subs, but we hired substitutes to be in our buildings every single day in every building.
yeah,
To support whatever needs that we had for them. It might have been helping keep kids spaced in the hallway. It might have been covering the classroom. It might have been covering for teachers that needed to teach remotely. We paid hourly staff for anything that they had to do above and beyond their regular schedule. I mean, I won't argue the philosophical piece that you're talking about,
Yeah.
Councilor Phillips, but when you look at, and again, I was part of it, but there was also a needs analysis done. You know, our curriculum director worked with our leadership team, worked with our staff members. You know, this just wasn't sitting behind a desk and deciding what to spend it on.
No,
So I'll give you some other examples. Health and physical education, with physical education, so many of their programs and activities that they do require that students be close to each other. They had to look into different activities that were socially and physically distant. So mountain biking became a very popular thing. We were able to get mountain bikes for our students and staff. So some really good things have come out of this.
So where do you store them all? Who
Well,
makes?
that's another thing, I'm glad you said that. We purchased a number of storage units. Okay, and in fact, we're looking for more, Counselor Blanchett.
Who's
we
going
also
to maintain them?
The maintenance staff that we have. Okay, we also purchased 2 school buses, because if you were going to be bringing students back and have them sitting 3 feet apart on a bus, which limits the number of kids you can have, you're gonna need more buses to transport. Okay, 2 buses, 2 vans. It's one of the reasons that you see your transportation budget down this year. We're not looking to update our fleet anymore.
and so,
Is there any more money expected off of the money tree from DC coming in? Or have we reached the end of it?
Well, to my understanding, what I've just given you, that's all I'm aware of. But it kind of goes back to Glenn's question. You know, the last 2 amounts, the 888,000 and 1.9 million, we're looking at how we can leverage that and use that to the benefit of our students and staff to keep schools open, to keep them safe, and keep kids in-person instruction. Okay, so if we can use that out to 2022 and 2023, we don't want to expend it all right now, because right now it appears as though we're headed in a great direction, right? One never knows if that's going to change.
yeah, it's almost mind-boggling to sit here and think about that's almost 30, yeah. if I do it,
Personal
that's
protective
Nearly
equipment.
30% additional over and above your planned expenditures, and additional cash.
Personal protective equipment?
So
Well, congratulations on obtaining it, hopefully,
Well, I mean, the other piece I think is important for people to know, you know, we had to fill out an application. It had to meet the parameters of the CRF, and the ESSER funds, the last 2 sets of money have similar parameters, but were distributed differently. They were distributed on a Title I eligibility formula, so there were some more specific ways that you needed to use them. The other thing that I think is interesting in Maine, when you look at some of the pieces that are in those funds, it's talking about planning for coordinating during long-term closures, purchasing educational technology, hardware, software, infrastructure to permit remote. I mean, these are things that have been happening in Maine all year long. Across the country, schools haven't been in session. The other piece with the last 2 sets is, how can we address social, emotional, mental health of our kids who've been impacted by this, and the learning recovery. And that's where you see the greatest bang for the buck with these pieces. But we had to go through an application process that had to be vetted in Augusta. It had to be approved. And you'll like this part. When we submit the vouchers for reimbursement, a copy of every single invoice had to be submitted and sent every time you requested it. And it had to be re-vetted again on the other end. So we've met all the parameters that have been put in place. And from my estimation, our staff, and I'll speak for our staff, they've done an incredible job of using the funds that have been given to us to keep our schools open and to keep people safe.
I have no doubt in my mind that with any free money, there are plenty of strings attached.
I've heard that phrase about free federal money.
So I
Well,
would-
the other piece, and it's important to know this, in accepting these CRF funds, you also had to sign an attestation
There's a green room.
that you will follow all of the health and safety requirements as issued by the Department of Health and Human Services and Department of Education.
Yeah, and I certainly think that, I don't think anybody's suggesting that the money wasn't used appropriately, and
No.
in fact, it was used in a way to keep schools going. I do think, and I hope the community keeps this in mind, whether it's next year or the year after. One, I've made my position known very clearly that I've been very concerned about the emotional and mental health of our youth, and that decisions made outside of this community, this is not about your school system at all and how it's been managed, This is about policies that have come down from Augusta. And that's an impact that's not going away just because school's going to reopen. That is something that we, as a community, need to pay attention to and recognize that we need to have resources to support students and provide that support, both educationally and from their mental health, as well as other members of the community. That's huge. The other piece that the community really needs to recognize, there is a fiscal cliff. It's not this year, it may not be next year, but there is a fiscal cliff that is going to happen as a result of all of this money that's been put forward. And that's not a judgment about whether the funding should have been provided or not. That has nothing to do with it. The reality is, when you look at this budget, when you project forward, at some point, we're not going to have these stimulus funds to pay for these services, to Manager Mosier's point. And that's going to be a reality that over the next couple of years, a council is going to be wrestling with, and the likelihood is that we will see some pretty dramatic increases at the local level. So it's something to be aware of. I do think personally that we need to recognize that members of this community have been impacted significantly by COVID. They've lost their jobs, and over the next year or so, we certainly want to mitigate that for the community. But at some point, it is going to come back, and somebody's going to end up having to pay for it, and that's a reality. Do have one more comment, and this is a nice reminder from one of the school board members, Abby Miller. While some of the special ed expenses seem daunting, they're also going to be less expensive than what it will cost the town if we were sued by a special ed parent whose child had not had their needs met. Going to remind everyone that each child is entitled by law to a fair and appropriate education. Our district is in great need of special ed resources. Without them, we leave ourselves open to expensive lawsuits. Other questions?
And if I may say, that she makes a great point, because that has been a challenge this year. And stimulus funds, COVID funds, ESSER funds or not, that is a possibility, whether you have these funds or not. So.
Any other comments about the school budget? Not at this point. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And just in terms of the process, as the community knows, the council will ultimately vote on the overall budget for the school. We don't get into line items, and but then the community has the ultimate say in terms of it goes out to vote to authorize the budget. So that's the process that will be followed, and I just want to remind everybody that's the process. So certainly, individuals who have questions should make put their questions forward to make sure answers are provided. All right. Anything else on that one? If not, the only other item was just, and I don't believe we have, Manager Mosher, any new updates on the Recovery Act funds that we're expecting, but if we could just quickly talk about that so that the community's on the front end of that.
Yeah, so I do have some preliminary information that's been provided by the Director of Federal Liaison Center regarding the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. And so at this point, and this is guidance coming from the federal government, so it's unclear as to there may be additional restrictions, if you will, placed from the state level. But the eligible uses include to respond to the public health emergency with respect to the coronavirus 2019 or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. To respond to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency by providing premium pay to eligible workers of the state, territory, or tribal local government that are performing such essential work, or by providing grants to eligible employers that have eligible workers who perform essential work. For the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue of such state, territory, or tribal local government due to the COVID-19 public health emergency relative to revenues collected in the most recent full fiscal year of the state, territory, or tribal government prior to the emergency, or to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. The two listed restrictions on this are funds cannot be used to directly or indirectly offset tax reductions or delay a tax increase. Funds cannot be deposited into any pension funds. And funding available through and must be spent by end of calendar year 2024.
2024?
2024, according to this.
So we're expecting 800,000?
Yes, in two payments, so the, let's see, payments to the local governments will be made in two tranches. First half, 60 days after enactment, second half, 1 year later. So, I know that's a whole lot of things to try and understand and digest, but it gives us a little bit of a glimpse into what we can expect with these funds.
Will you, you and your staff, make some recommendations as part of the budgeting process in terms of how we might utilize that as a starting point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just got this information today, and I have already shared it and spoken with a couple of staff members, particularly Jana Richards, since she is the economic development person, and she already has some ideas of ways.
She already spent it.
She probably has. Lisa Suklovich was also in my office for a meeting, and I shared with her.
She's already spent it.
So they are definitely.
I take that back. You don't need to present anything. I've already spent.
They definitely have ideas. So yeah, I don't think there'll be much. There might be some arm wrestling contest to see where the money actually gets expended, but yes. So we will. I don't know. Again, we don't know. We're still obviously in the budget process. But wherever possible, we will certainly come up with some creative ways to inject these funds.
So that was 800,000 approximately?
Well, it'll be 400,000 for FY '22.
Yeah,
and
but no, but
change.
800 total.
Yes.
I suppose they need the extra year to print more money, but that pales when you compare it to the 6.1 million that the schools get over a year.
Yeah. We could use that.
You know, if they could spend it what was necessary, instead of having to spend it on anything except for what was necessary. Could have probably cut everybody's taxes in half last year.
But is it, all of the dollars, there's a maintenance of effort, meaning that you cannot use it to reduce. You
Right.
have to keep the tax rate the same and use it for other purposes. It's a stipulation. All right,
Reach into the goodie bag.
any other items that we need to discuss?
I'm in awe still.
Long grueling process. This is day one.
Thank God. Hopefully numbers get smaller then.
This is your first budget, Gene, right?
Huh?
First budget, right?
Yeah. I wish I could run my checkbook that way.
All right, seeing nothing else,
Is
we're
our budget in the
adjourned.
book yet, or is that still on?
Thank you.
Tomorrow.